I can tell you an embarrassing story. Oh, I'm not really sure where my private key is. When we began to relay, that's really when we began to grow fast. By the way, if you're watching this video, do not ever relay that way. Early on, validating was a lot more profitable than it is today, vastly more. The whole thing from end to end would have played out positive for the Cosmos Hub, both on the side of like, no, don't fork the hub, that's crazy. Also like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Hey guys, should we spoon? If I'm giving advice to anybody who wants to take that path, it would actually be...
Welcome to the Bare Metal Podcast.
Hey everyone, this is Ship the Code from Rockaway X on the Bare Metal Podcast. Welcome back everybody, and today I have here with me the well-known Jacob Gadikian of Notional fame. Welcome, Jacob.
Hey, thanks for having me, man. How are you today?
Doing pretty well. How are you?
Dude, I'm good.
To start us off,
okay.
First I'd be interested in, how you guys got started. I came to Cosmos pretty late, and you guys were already established and in the house. And there's this interesting thing that, you being a U.S. citizen, you're in Vietnam now. And my question would be, how did that happen? So, how did Notional start? How did you guys end up in Vietnam? That's my first question.
So it's unusual story. All right. So I'm American. I'm married to a woman from Cambodia, and we were married by a friend of mine who's from Hanoi, Vietnam. And when our kid was about 6-7 months old, Duong, the gentleman who married us, he said, "Hey, why don't you come by?" And we said, "Okay." Now, dates matter here. He contacted me maybe December 2019. So we flew to Vietnam in January 2020. And then COVID started. So in a very real way, Notional is what it is today, for better, for worse, right? Because of COVID.
Okay.
We were going to be there for like a month. I was just going to go and see a friend, go back home. But that's not how it worked out. How it worked out was, well, first of all, even during that month, I didn't actually end up seeing my friend very much. But he had a spare apartment where we were staying. This is actually where Notional started. Like all of our validators lived there at one point. And so let's see. All right, osmosis. That's the next part of our starting story. So first of all, in 2020, I was working at AIB and another project founded by Sonny King, not Sonny Argawal. And Sonny King is famous for PureCoin. He booted up proof of stake. And somehow along the way, not too long before Osmosis eventually launched, I ended up on a call with Sonny Argawal, and he was shilling me this thing really hard. And so, I was actually researching DEXs. That's, how I ended up on that call. And I was going to build do you remember Filecoin?
Yeah.
I was going to build a Filecoin plotter. And midstream, after spending, basically I had even raised capital to do it, I spent $20,000 of my own money on the necessary equipment and realized that, wait, this is going to be unprofitable for the investors. And so I sent them back their funds, and I had this ridiculously fancy high-grade computer. And then I heard that Osmosis was doing a Genesis. I had that wonderful call with Sonny and decided, what I can do is validate Osmosis. And it turned out to just be this fantastic decision. Notional, really did not exist before Osmosis Genesis. And after Genesis, we began to find problems and then try and fix them. And like this worked. What I mean is that basically there was this young gentleman, Kang, who sort of, for lack of a better sense, followed me around. And he tells the story the same way. He's like, oh, so I just started to follow you around. I'm like, okay, man. And he would help me whenever there was an issue. This got noticed because out of the early Osmo validator set, we were either the only validator or one of them, possibly the only one though, like making contributions routinely. So then the problems started to come to us. And then one day, I discovered that relaying was really hard and fun. And that the things that made it really hard were kind of like difficult fundamental software engineering problems. And so I wanted to chase them. I'm all right with code, right? But I'm no Kang, right? Like Kang is whoa. And then he went and he recruited members of his college class. Most of our team graduated Hanoi University of Science and Technology. And this formed this like really powerhouse core team so we have Kang, Vong, and Long from HUST. We also have Tuan, who also graduated HUST, but he's actually a year older than me, whereas everybody else sort of like fresh graduates. And that filled out like our early team. And early on, we were really dedicated to solving more infrastructure layer problems. We have moved toward the application layer now, and recently completed the fee abstraction module for the Cosmos Hub, and also are working on a auction module for Gravity Bridge, and have done a good deal of end-to-end chain development as well. So you were asking.
So let me
about,
get back to this to the story. So
yes,
first
sir.
of all, I'm flabbergasted, bordering on flabbergasted, surprised that you being in Vietnam is actually happenstance. I thought you were going to give me this like sort of economic story of it all makes sense, and we built this DCs here, but it's a totally
not at all.
random thing. So I'm like, okay,
Yep.
very, very, very interesting. I have two questions. One is, was Osmosis your first validator, or did you guys already validate the hub before that?
I can tell you an embarrassing story.
Yeah, please.
I had a mainnet validator under a different name, Hostronics, on the Akash network, and failed horribly at Genesis time. So actually, we did well during the testnet, and things were good. And then Genesis came. I mishandled privvalidator.json. Now, not in the way that you might think. One might think, oh, he's about to talk about double signing. No, couldn't sign at all. Didn't know where it was.
Okay, that's
but pain is a very good teacher, and I did eventually find the right privvalidator JSON file. Thank God. We got up and running, but then we're quickly bumped out of the set because for the first 6-10 hours of the network, we were down, and that's when people were placing their initial delegations.
Right.
So that was the first mainnet validator, actually. Osmo, I guess technically for me personally was the second, but also Hostronics didn't have Kang or Long, and certainly we're a more well-rounded team now.
And okay, so the hub came after all of these, right? So first was Takash, then was Osmosis, and then later on you guys got onto the hub.
That's correct.
And
here's how it was. Akash, that validator moniker is dead. And later on, I recreated a notional validator on Akash because Hostronics just didn't work. The whole plan associated with it. was not going to happen. I was also in Vietnam at that time. I think that was December 2020. But we put the brakes on every aspect of that work. I think I forgot about validating for some time and then saw the announcement about osmosis, and I thought, wow, Sonny's really great, and he's shilling this so heavily. It must be cool. And I mean, it really was actually. It blew away every expectation I had for it. And so Osmo was the first as Notional. After that, I think actually Akash might have been the second as Notional, because I had met Greg, who was like super awesome, even throughout the grievous, heinous challenge of, oh, I'm not really sure where my private key is. The next, I think what might have been Sentinel, actually, because that was one of the early ones.
DVPN.
Yeah, and when we began to relay, that's really when we began to grow fast. Because early on, we were by far the fastest and largest relayer. I'll toss you the stat of between 50 and 80% of total IBC volume from about the end of July to about the next February, so like Feb 22. The reason for this, actually, here's maybe that computer turned out to be really lucky, the one that I bought to be a Filecoin plotter, because I had built this RAID array in it. I didn't realize it. In fact, nobody realized it. In fact, there were actual meetings. Why can they take over the whole IBC network by turning this machine on? And why, the second it's off, it was crazy. It was like a light switch. And what it turned out to be actually was that we were the only one that wasn't suffering from that weird node query pressure problem, which still exists today, but is like much, much better. And so we would often be like a block or two ahead of others. So as long as that machine was on, we would actually take over most of the channels.
So all these parallel key value queries that were required, or the sort of like the tons of the queries, you guys were able to do fast because of the RAID structure of the storage, and therefore be quicker.
Ridiculous.
That's funny. Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
But look, you said two things that are interesting. First of all, like you guys started growing the team after osmosis, like finding and solving issues. I think that's a path many people would like to take. So that appeals to me as well. How did you guys get funded? When you said you were starting to hire other guys, where did you guys pick up capital for that?
Actually, so early on, validating was a lot more profitable than it is today. Vastly more profitable. And so early on, it was entirely Validator revenue that drove the expansion of the business. When I say vastly, it's over 10x. Mm-hmm. It was more than 10 times as profitable to validate, like back around that time. And then really the launch of osmosis drove those other chains to Moon. So you had one more chain and you had even more capital. Mm-hmm. Now, I'll tell you, maybe the sin is, we really didn't sell anything. So that hurts right now. But early on, it was that. We have never raised VC. So we are funded. I put about $50,000 in over the course of the first, say, 6 months, right? Mainly on equipment. We would pay people actually just in coins, and at some point, we were hired by osmosis to, basically attack anything. Actually, that was really cool. We have, had a very open-ended arrangement with them where it was like, we kind of call out, okay, well, this looks good, run it past them, and then take care of it. That actually exists to this day. So that was our first customer.
Let's say support contract.
And Yeah. Well, more code than support, actually.
So that's what I meant. Like as a software
And
developer.
if I'm giving advice to anybody who wants to take that path, it would actually be to like create that issue on GitHub or write that pull request that like you've been thinking about writing, but maybe you didn't make it. Your first attempt will probably not really work, but maybe it will. By the way, that's whatever. But the thing is, getting into the contributor culture in Cosmos is fantastic, and very few projects will not guide you. And by the way, you don't need to wait to get hired to do that. That's probably one of the reasons why we did well, or even still do well today, is we do work that isn't necessarily paid. Basically, our policy is like, well, if there's an interesting problem, fix it. We, talk details in a minute. And that led us into really a great many interesting situations because, it was several of us checking through chains, seeing what we could improve. Early on, it was mainly performance related. And these days we're taking on a lot more scope. But yeah, those little things. Oh, here's another one. Creating scripts for the chains that you validate. Looking for ways to improve the CLI tooling, because that's not too hard to work on, although sometimes it's like hurts your brain a bit because the CLI is a little convoluted, but it's gotten a lot better in recent SDK versions. And what else is good? Okay, nearly every repository will have a few issues on it that are tagged good first issue. This is great for a couple of reasons. One, it actually lets you know that the maintainer of that repository is actually looking for help. Two, when you see that good first issue stuff, probably the maintainer knows that they'll need to help you with it, and they don't mind,
The right
which is
expectation.
also great. Yeah.
The other thing that I wanted to ask about, like the roundabout way to go to back to the second question, you guys said you started growing a lot when you started Relay.
Yeah.
That's also interesting, like because relaying is to this day, it's unless you get grants from the foundation, it's a loss leader, right? I mean, you have to pay for the transactions as a validator, and it's very hard, especially today, super hard for validators to fund these wallets and keep relaying. So
correct.
You guys, again, you did something that is actually extractive to you, but you grew. So that's another interesting point. So why did that happen?
We were the fastest relayer by far at that time. And we were the largest relayer by far at that time. Actually, like, to be, not super, people just wanted to be on the computer in my apartment with the magic powers. And then along the way, like, we figured out why it had magic powers. I really didn't know. I would talk to other validators and other relayers, and I would say, guys, like, why is this happening? Another example. This machine would complete the Osmo APOC back when it used to take 20 minutes in a minute and a half. And, what it turned out to be was just entirely that it was 4 Samsung 980s in a XFS RAID that was designed to do all the read writes like in parallel. The settings that you need for a Cosmos chain to do really great performance-wise, literally by coincidence, happen to be approximately the settings that you need for a really good plotter.
So do you remember what sort of RAID this was? Was it like a mirror, or like actually a Stripe RAID, like a RAID 5 or something?
Stripe.
Okay.
Yep. Not mirrored. No, yeah, it was danger mode. Actually, there were, if you look at like our Osmosis Validator wallet, you will see that it made tens of thousands of transactions. That was our relayer. Because I was learning on the job, shall we say. By the way, if you're watching this video, do not ever relay that way. That's bad. It was completely unsafe. Obviously, we no longer do that. But that's, I suppose, an interesting piece of our history.
But still, look at the economic side of this is also more interesting to me, right? I mean, people could go and set up a relayer. They could go for the best practice, but like, how did you guys sustain that? Like, was there a contract that you guys had with the foundation to do the relaying because you were such good relayers? Was it the same thing? Like, you set up your reputation and then sort of like the reward came after? How'd that work?
Yes, that's exactly correct. So I think around 6, maybe 8 months after Osmosis launched, which is about 5 to 7 months after we began to relay, that's when we did begin to have a contract for the relaying, which actually isn't all that huge. Actually, at the time it was huge. Sorry. Yes, at the time it's a Osmo denominated contract. And so his value has declined a lot, but it's all right. Relaying does remain a loss, which is, that's quite unfortunate. But I think that we're close to fixing that. I don't think that IBC fees is going to fix it. I think that I've heard about some upcoming solutions. Don't actually know if I can talk about them, so I'm not going to. But wait, I think they published it. It's called Skip Sync. Mm-hmm. And I think I saw it on Twitter. If I didn't, I'll ask you to cut this. That it looks viable, because here's the thing so let's empathize on both sides, right? So relaying is hell, and it's hell for the validators for the exact reasons that you mentioned. It's hell for the foundations because it's really tough to measure. Also, you can't precisely contract with one company. Our relay uptime is like 99.7 now, that's way, way better. Right? Probably back in the day it was like 80%, right? But no, probably higher than that, maybe 95. I don't know. But anyway, still, it's far better. And so basically, though, yeah, we're great. We're really good at relaying. Yay, right? But guess what? I don't think there's actually anybody who can do a high capacity channel by themselves and be reliable. There's too many events that can interrupt a single operator's relaying work. I'll give a few examples. So machine reboots, and then you need to get your node synced back up, and then you need to get your relayer back up. A disk fails, and okay, now you're just down until you've got that replaced, or you've moved to another machine if you're a cloud user. Configuration errors that take time to debug. And are people working to automate it? Yes. Does that include us? Yes. And that's how we've gotten much, much better uptime over time. But when chains come to me to ask, well, how do we do relaying? One of the first things that I tell them, it's 2 or 3 relayers per channel to be,
Totally agree.
like production grade reliability.
I do 3 to 4, yeah.
And then
like that.
Yep, yeah. I 4. I don't know about 4,
Just
but like
for the backup,
it could be 4.
Yeah, no, but only the first one actually matters, right? But for censorship resistance, you might want to have people like at different places, right? Somebody not, or is not able to relay some types of transactions, so you want to have a backup for that. So you might end up with like even 2 because 2 of them are not willing to. So this is this is all ballpark, right? I'm not claiming 4 is a magic number, but
yeah,
so like,
I don't think we've seen censorship yet, but I think we will.
Yeah,
I definitely think we will. And it's going to get weird. like real weird.
Yeah, totally could
What
be.
What are your thoughts on that, man? Like,
Look, I think it's pretty simple. As you know,
okay,
we're the guys who are always talking about geographic decentralization and why we think it matters. And this is like, I just think that for a chain to be credibly neutral, like I love that, post by Vitalik. There's two things. It needs to be decentralized, but it also needs to be able to prove that. So, like in
yep,
my mind, to preempt sort of all censorship is going to happen. Governance might decide different things. I guess we're all
yep,
expecting that. So I think the only way to prepare for that future is to be ready for it and not sort of do incident
yeah,
response later, right? So like in my mind,
I
it would
agree with
pay
you.
to invest right now into thinking and designing the systems to be already resilient. So when somebody comes in and says, okay, this is hopefully this is concentrated somewhere so I can pressure some regulator somewhere to shut this down, there's no solution to this problem. So this is sort
That's
of the way
right.
that we think about it. And this applies also to like relaying channels, right? So like, is there a good way to think about markets to support relayers to run diverse channels? Like you don't want everybody piled in on the Osmosis hub channel. You'd also ideally like to support other channels. Like, could you somehow design like a structure where you like, let's say the foundation was to support that lay out a clear sort of plan. Hey, this is how we plan to do this. We're willing to pay this much. It's rentable. It makes sense for 3 to 4 validators to validate. But if more pile in, it's just going to be unprofitable for everybody. So maybe like, you need to go find another market. Like this is very
So
early
I
thinking,
think this is the plan. No, I think that this is the plan. And by the way, that's like, this is what I'm telling people. 4 was a new number to me. I'm always 2 to 3, but like 4 is fine too. 10 is probably too many for a single channel, just because you get too much
yeah,
going
there's
on
too
there.
much waste, right? I mean, you still
Yeah, yeah,
the Cosmos solution doesn't really allow you to lock like a transaction and say I'm handling this one. So you have all relayers
that's
that are on
right.
the channel submitting it's like wasting funds, right? Essentially. But you do want to have like 2 or 3 touches, so you've got those backups in there, right? So
Yep.
like I think I have no evidence that 4 is the best number. Like we keep, like I just don't want to like stand behind this number. We were thinking stuff like
No,
2 to 4.
hey, two
Like,
two to three is
oh, whatever.
2 to 3 is also. I don't have enough evidence. What's
We haven't
cool
done any
is
modeling on this side yet.
like I think Skip is studying this. I think TFM is studying this, and it's good to be researching a solution other than like the IBC fees module, because I'm not really sure that's going to work.
Do you think? But so why is that?
Like,
That's interesting. So do you think users won't
oh,
want to
okay.
use this, or do you think the fees won't cover or the fees would only
I
go to
think
the first committer of the transaction and not to anybody else, so it won't fund the backups? Like what's
so.
the?
That's actually the
Oh, okay.
problem.
So that's
I
yeah.
think it introduces kind of perverse incentives. Because, okay, suppose that I rebuilt that magic computer but faster or something. Because it would need to be faster today, because actually I open sourced the design to it when I realized what was going on with it. So that like secret is out there. It also, striped LVM seems to be faster than that original configuration. But point being that relayers would have a very serious financial incentive to actually stop helping each other. And since I imagine you've relayed or at least run into the relayer community, you know that relayers actually do need to help each other quite a bit. And
100%. Yeah.
that's that's the issue with the IBC fee model, and the solutions that are being discussed will. Well, at least in the Skip case, I don't have as much detail on TFM solution, but in the Skip case, it will actually do what's optimal, right? So there will be payments for several relayers per channel. It seems like a pretty good economic design.
Right. If you're in the top
I'm
3 or
quite
top 4, like you should get sort of funded. That's the sort of idea where you could like sort of really set up the size of the market. So the guys, let's say the 4 is their fastest or something like that, and if you are in this set a couple of times a month, right, for some proportion, then you fall into this and you can get funded. This is the sort of way we were thinking about it as well.
the top N would be paid the same. And actually, this is really important because, look, if you're 30 milliseconds slower than me consistently, it's going to result in your catching probably 90% fewer packets than me. However, you're doing 100% of the work. And the minute that my machine goes down, if you're 30
important.
milliseconds
Yeah.
slower, there's another guy who's 20 milliseconds slower than
There's no
you.
disruption if the second guy's there. Yeah.
Exactly. And, if you go down while I'm down, well, there's this third guy, he's a little bit slower than you. And, at the end of the day, these are milliseconds. It doesn't matter to the user experience.
Not today.
As long
Not today,
as that's true. That's true. I do think we'll speed things up quite a bit. And the milliseconds
yeah, but today
might
that's
matter.
right. Yeah, so I totally agree. Look, what you're saying absolutely makes sense to me. I didn't actually think through the implications of the fee modules economically, so it's actually asked you to point out that this would incentivize people just try and be first and grab the entire market, and disincentivize the backups or the guys who are can actually take the ball before it drops.
Yeah.
That makes sense. So this is super interesting roundabout way to get to let's say IBC economics or IBC internals through Notional. There's some obviously I see a lot on Twitter. You have a bunch of opinions on current topics. I've seen a few ones discussed. So what do you think about the ideas around the Cosmos Hub fork? That caught my attention. Could you give me your sort of summary of why you see that's going to happen, not going to happen? What's your take?
Absolutely. Okay, so first of all, I want to make a little disambiguation. There's some group doing something, Cosmos United. I have nothing to do with that. I never will have anything to do with that. Mm-hmm. They've taken a really negative stance on stuff, and I'm just not interested in taking that path. And I have no idea if they have any software. If they do have software, it's not open source. I've looked for it. So maybe that exists and maybe it doesn't. I don't know. But what I do know is that, look, I voted yes for Atom 2.0 because I thought it was a really good set of ideas. Now, it's not without its faults or whatever, but, my overall thrust was okay, this is a vision for the hub. It's executable. Let's do it because we needed a vision. We needed a guiding light. And hey, look, this guy Sam just dropped it in our lap. All right, let's go. And now, so let's say that I still have positive vibes on that to this day. But let's also say that, in fact, the whole argument about having a minimal hub, it also makes sense to me. We've vetoed CosmWasm on the hub twice now. I guess the second time was really more about the aim of the proposal, which was to make the hub into an app store, which I just thought, this is not good news, right?
Not if you've ever developed mobile apps, as I have. Please don't build the app store on the hub. It's really painful.
I see. So, what they meant by app store, though, was more like a set of contracts on the hub that would have put the hub in competition with Neutron, which I think is a very, very promising team. It would have put the hub in competition with Osmosis. And look, I don't think it's a competition that the hub would have won. And I don't think that the whole thing from end to end would have played out positive for the Cosmos hub. There's one solution or one situation, I want to say, that I would not veto CosmWasm on the hub. That's for mesh security. Mesh is very important. And I think that one of the things that maybe isn't fully understood about mesh security is that it's going to allow the hub and other chains to import security not only from other Cosmos chains, but other ecosystems too. So, if there was a scope restricted governance proposal put on the Cosmos hub, okay, this is for mesh security. Yes, instant, no problem. But
So you're not worried about the
that's
custom
just
WASM integration or any sort of vulns that could appear as a result of the added software complexity. This is more about you're worried what the contracts would be used for, and you want to very specifically focus
yeah,
like the
and
attention of
like
the hub to things where it makes sense for the hub to be the leader. Is that a fair take?
that. Yeah, that's correct. Although I will say that it's real, right? Like the complexity of the hub will go up a lot with
If
Cosm
that
WASM.
happens, yeah, 100%.
Yeah. But I just think that mesh is worth it, and putting a bunch of DeFi apps on the hub is not worth it. I know that may sound silly, but it's like if you vote yes on a governance proposal that says, okay, let's do Cosm WASM on the hub so that we can do an app store, you're likely to get an app store. I'd like to veto the app store, And if you vote yes on a governance proposal on the hub that says, okay, this is scope restricted to infrastructure products, specifically mesh security, but potentially other infra products. We're not going to do DeFi because that would put us in opposition to the consumer chains that rely on the hub. Well, that seems great to me. Even though I'll tell you my biggest concern, it's actually Seago. It's where the Go meets the Rust for Cosm WASM. I don't like that place in the code, and I'd really love to see like a spin of Cosm WASM that uses WA0. I thought that I'd actually be able to crank it out in a couple of days. It turned out to be much harder than that. So we've held a couple of internal workshops on it and stuff. I would love to do it. That would make me more comfortable with CW integration, not only on the hub, but anywhere. Because we have seen some issues just related to using the ABI. But overall, yeah, my concern with the latest Cosm WASM proposal was really just that the directionality of it was straight toward DeFi. It's like, no, we have really good DeFi in Cosmos, and I don't think we need yet one more chain that ends up dominated by DeFi. In fact, if we look at the history, right, the hub, it was supposed to be featureless. And here's where we get into the spoon. Let's not call it a spoon. And by the way, Jin Kwan, if you see this, thank you for reminding me of the proper term for a non-contentious fork. So a spoon, right, is this idea of, first of all, we're not nuking anybody's balances. We don't hate each other. We're not going to waste time on that stuff. We're going to recognize that there are two paths that we can take. They are incompatible. They're both interesting. Okay, Atom 2.0 is interesting. Keeping the hub really minimal is also interesting. They're interesting for different reasons. Over here, we have extreme software safety and network resilience, right? Over here, we have basically making the hub more dynamic, making it more reactive, making it able to, respond to its environment better. And through that, because the people arguing for this path over here, they're saying this is the safest path. They could be right, okay? Over here could be the most viable path. I have concerns about, like, introducing reactivity to a system. I also fully recognize that there are a bunch of compelling ideas in the Atom 2.0 document. And sort of at some point, it's like, why not experiment with that, right? Now, over here, we have, and this camp's kind of led by Jay. This camp is led, I'd say the spiritual leader is actually Sam Hart. I don't even know if he directly works in Cosmos anymore, but he
works at Skip, right?
spent so much time. What's that?
So, he's at Skip, right? So,
oh yeah, that's right. That's right. Actually, yeah. And I just talked to him at Skip actually just the other day, but scatterbrained.
So you're just thinking that both of these futures are viable and there are going to be communities forming around them. So there's essentially, that's why you think it is going to eventually happen.
Yeah. Were you around for the Atom 2.0 debate?
Yeah, sure. There was a
Okay,
lot of vitriol
so
in there. I was surprised. Yeah,
right, too much, way too
it's
much.
painful.
And we're still sort of dealing with the aftermath of it today, and it's stupid. So if we just respect one another and notice that really we've been working together, I mean the community, right? We've been working together for some time. And hey, this group wants this thing. If we do that, we can't do this thing. And this group, they want to do very, very little, actually. If we do that, we can't do this. And so, I think it's possible. By the way, my tweets about it are kind of testing the waters. I don't know if this is the right path. I'm not yet strongly convicted. I've been getting really interesting feedback, both on the side of like, no, don't fork the hub, that's crazy. And also like, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm kind of listening to that feedback right now.
But what would happen to
Because
Atom?
it's not hard to fork.
Atom is the backbone of Cosmos in some sense. Like I still perceive it this way, right? And it's the carrier of the whole idea of actions. So what would happen to Atom, the asset, if you do the fork, right? I mean, obviously, yes, you create another denom. Yeah, I get that. But what happens to the value contained in Atom? Like what would the new world map look like in Cosmos? Universe map.
Well, so the hope would be that it doesn't affect. So, like, suppose
whatever's
that the new
perceived
chain
as
is
the actual original carrier of the idea, right? Which would be which one? The minimalist one or the?
I don't know. So here's the thing. The minimalist one was built with governance. And I have a feeling that the right way to proceed with this would actually be to do a governance proposal. Hey, guys, should we spoon? Because you really need some consensus around this. I don't want to create a chain that competes with, the conservative chain in my mind doesn't really compete with the featureful hub. They're quite different things. And what I don't want is to see all these brilliant friends and colleagues of mine, go at each other's throats again over something that, in my opinion, we actually worked out how to solve. You snapshot the whole supply, including everything that's out on IBC. You add them to wallets in a Genesis file. And, I suppose we could need to have like one highly contentious governance proposal to decide like, Cosmos Hub 4, is it conservative or is it reactive?
Okay, so
and that's actually how I'm.
So you decide which is the
phrasing,
carrier of the history, and who's the forker by governance.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
I guess, but that could go crazy and be really unpleasant. I'm not sure.
Of course it will. Come on.
But like, yeah, definitely. However, then at least we don't like have a spur of the moment fork because of something stupid like Cosmwasm. What I mean by stupid, by the way, Cosmwasm is great. It would be really stupid.
There's a bad issue to fork over.
To harm. Yeah, exactly.
Spoon, as you say.
It's a spoon, precisely.
All right, I think that's this is a pretty interesting time to be in Cosmos. So let's hope, if a fork happens, it happens as a civilized way. We can all hash it out, and come to a good way, agree on a good way moving forward.
I hope so. I won't push for it if it seems it'll be like super controversial, because the whole idea is to just avoid trouble. I'd like to thank you for having me on here today, man. It was a real good time.
Yeah, thanks very much for coming on, and good luck with Notional.
Thank you, dude. Thank you.